of the House Judiciary and Foreign Affairs Committees. Congressman, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us today. And I want to start with your Republican colleague on the Judiciary Committee, Matt Gaetz. The DOJ looking into whether Gaetz had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl and paid for her to travel with him. Now, the congressman has repeatedly denied wrongdoing. He hasn't been charged with a crime, but the House Ethics Committee has now announced its own investigation into Gaetz for sexual misconduct. His office responding with a statement saying, once again, the office will reiterate these allegations are blatantly false and have not been validated by a single human being willing to put their name behind them. Should Gaetz still be serving with you on the Judiciary Committee while he's the subject of an investigation?
Well, these are very, very serious allegations. There's an active Department of Justice investigation and now an Ethics Committee investigation. And obviously, if these allegations turn out to be true, he would be forced to either resign or be removed from his office by Congress. It probably also makes sense in this context, while the Department of Justice is undergoing their own investigation of him, for him not to sit on the committee that has oversight responsibilities of the Department of Justice. But again, if these allegations turn out to be true, either through the Ethics Committee investigation or the Department of Justice, I think he will be left with no choice but to resign. And if he doesn't, he'll be removed by his colleagues from Congress. Well,
Congressman Adam Kinzinger is already the first House Republican to call for Gaetz's resignation. You're saying that it should be adjudicated first, and if true, then Gaetz should resign. Do you think that more lawmakers are going to join Kinzinger in those calls?
I really don't know. I mean, I think it's very important. These are active investigations. These are very serious accusations. We ought to let these investigations conclude. Again, I think it probably makes sense not to sit on the committee that has oversight responsibilities for one of the agencies conducting the investigation, but I have a lot of confidence they will do this work thoroughly and quickly, and we'll have these results as soon as they're concluded.
Let's turn to gun reform now. You were one of 7 members invited to the Rose Garden to witness President Biden sign his new executive orders on guns. And the president's measures target ghost guns and red flag laws. Let's listen to how Republican Texas Governor Greg Abbott responded to those actions earlier today.
If the president really wanted to do something substantively, what he really could do by executive order is to eliminate the backlog of complaints that have already been filed about gun crimes that have taken place. By executive action, the president could cut down on gun crimes if all he did was to tell his executive branch to start prosecuting the gun crimes that have already been sent to the federal government.
What do you say to that, Congressman?
Well, I think what the president articulated were 5 executive actions that will make a real difference in the lives of the American people. He's using the full power of his office to ensure that he does everything he can to reduce gun violence in this country, which he described as a pandemic, as a public health crisis in this country. 316 people are shot every day. 106 people die at the hands of a gun every day in America. This is a national disgrace, and what the president announced was the use of the executive office and the powers of his office to reduce gun violence. Ghost guns are untraceable. They can be used in crimes without any trace whatsoever. They're particularly dangerous as a consequence. The president entered an executive order on red flag laws to make it more difficult to modify guns and make them more lethal, to do a gun trafficking report every year, and to invest in community-based, evidence-based strategies to reduce gun violence. He also said the Senate should pass the universal background checks and legislation to close the Charleston loophole, which we passed out of the House, which will save lives that are sitting in the Senate, wildly bipartisan, supported by 95% of the American people. And he also, of course, called for the passage of the assault weapons ban. So I think the president made it clear that he's going to take this issue on. We finally have a president that's serious about reducing gun violence in this country, and I look forward to working with President Biden as he continues to do this work.
Well, when we talk about this, Congressman, what about getting bipartisan support? Because we know one of the most recent mass shootings took place in Georgia. We just saw another one in Colorado, but it appears some Congress members are going in the opposite direction after some of these events. We're going to pop up a couple of those tweets here. Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is promoting her latest gun giveaway, and Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert tweeted in response to the president's executive actions, "The Second Amendment is absolute. Anyone who says otherwise is a tyrant." Do you expect any bipartisan support here?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the Second Amendment isn't absolute. There are restrictions that are allowed to be imposed. The Supreme Court of the United States has already recognized that. So that's just not true. And the reality is this is already bipartisan. Universal background checks, which was passed in a bipartisan way, has the support of 95% of the people in this country, including the vast majority of responsible gun owners, Republicans, Democrats, and independents. So common sense gun safety legislation is bipartisan. It's supported by the American people all across this country. The only place it appears not to be bipartisan is in the Republican cloakroom in Washington. And so really it's a question of Congress responding to the demand of the American people that we do all that we can in a bipartisan way to reduce gun violence in this country, to address the epidemic of gun violence. And, you know, we have these very common sense proposals like making sure background checks are conducted on guns. We know they work. 3.5 million gun sales were denied because someone went into a gun store who was not allowed to buy a gun under a law because they were a criminal, had other disqualifying characteristics, and they were stopped. The problem is about 20% of gun sales happen without a background check. So the universal background check bill closes that loophole. And the Charleston loophole is also closed in a second bill. These are supported by an overwhelming majority of the American people, fully bipartisan. And Republicans in Washington need to understand that.
Congressman, let's go full circle and talk about President Biden's $2 trillion infrastructure plan. Republican opposition to the proposal has been made clear. I'm sensing a pattern here in some of what we're talking about, but would you be supportive of this compromise we're hearing? One of those compromises being lowering the tax rate for corporations from the proposed 28% to 25%.
Well, the proposal to pay for this jobs plan is to lower the tax rate from 28% to 21%, which would put the United States at a place where most other developed countries are. And it would take that money and invest it back in rebuilding roads, bridges, ports, schools, broadband, provide assistance to the care economy who takes care of our seniors and people who are ill, and making investments in research and development and manufacturing to create millions of good-paying jobs. And so I'm sure President Biden is always willing to listen and to find compromise where it makes sense. But I think he's made very clear that we've got to move forward on this package to get people back to work, to invest in rebuilding the infrastructure, which is so essential to our competitiveness and our economic well-being. And so compromise is possible. But this is the same party that refused to provide a single vote for the American Rescue Plan that is providing help to hundreds of millions of Americans. So I know the president is always open to bipartisan improvements to his legislation. I think that process will continue, but we've got to get this done for the American people, to raise wages, to rebuild the economy so it works better for everyone, not just people at the very top.
All right, Congressman, we'll have to leave it there today. Thank you. Hope to see you again soon.
My pleasure.
Now to the latest on the coronavirus pandemic.